The best driver in the world just told his team what he needs fixed. And it wasn't make the car faster, it was something far more worrying than that. Max Verstappen is a 4-time world champion. He is sitting 6th in the standings, 110 points behind a 19-year-old. His team is the only one in the top 4 that hasn't won a single race all year. And when Formula One stopped for its summer break and someone asked him what has to change in the second half, the first real problem he named was not speed. It was something that should frighten every engineer in that garage. Because a slow car, you can fix. A slow car is a problem you can measure, take to the wind tunnel, and beat. But the thing Verstappen actually asked for is not more speed. It's something much harder to build, and the reason Red Bull might not be able to give it to him traces back to a single rule that almost nobody is talking about. Hold on to that rule, because it's the trap at the center of this whole story, and we come back to it. Here is what he actually said. Asked about Red Bull's priorities for the run-in, Verstappen said, "Yes, the team needs to find more overall performance, standard stuff." But then he kept going. The car, he said, sometimes just loses performance over a weekend or even from the start of a race to the end. He wants Red Bull to be more solid, more all-round, to have, in his words, more straightforward weekends, and he called that a big priority. Read that again, because it's stranger than it sounds. A 4-time champion's #1 request is not, "let me win." It's let the car behave the same way twice. He is not asking for a rocket. He is asking for a car he can trust from Friday to Sunday, because right now, he can't. And that is a far more damning thing to admit than simply being slow. We actually saw this with our own eyes at the Hungarian Grand Prix. In qualifying, Verstappen wasn't losing time to tyre wear, he was losing it to the car itself. He called it car degradation. Every lap he did, he said, just got worse and worse. Think about how upside down that is. In qualifying, the track normally gets faster as more rubber goes down. His car did the opposite. The longer the session went, the worse his car became. That is not a tyre problem. That is the car quietly falling out from underneath him. And here's the detail that makes it worse, not better. On paper, Red Bull has actually made big progress this year. Rewind to the opening races in Australia and China, and the RB22 was more than 1.5 seconds off the raw race pace and ocean in Formula One terms. By Belgium and Hungary, they'd clawed that down to around 0.2 of a second a lap. That is a huge recovery, and normally that's a good news story. But Verstappen doesn't fully trust those numbers, and here's why. A 0.2 gap on a chart tells you how fast the car is on its best lap. It tells you nothing about a car that won't give you that best lap twice in a row. The average has improved, the reliability of the feeling hasn't, and you can't build a title run on a car that's only occasionally the version of itself you need. So what is actually happening? This is where it stops being a mystery and becomes a diagnosis. For most of the year, the easy story has been that this is just Max's car, that it's built on a knife edge only he can ride. And that his complaints are the complaints of a genius who wants perfection. That excuse just died. Because he is no longer the only one saying it. When Motorsport.com asked his rookie teammate Ishak Hadjar what the biggest limitation of the car is, Hadjar didn't hesitate. Entry stability needs to be solved, he said, and then we can improve the rest. And Red Bull's own technical director Pierre Wash points at the same area. 3 completely different people, the 4-time champion, the 21-year-old rookie, and the engineer who designed the thing, all pointing at the same corner of the car. And that agreement is either Red Bull's best hope or its most terrifying sign. I'll let you decide which by the end. To understand how they got here, you have to go back to the start of the season because the car was born with problems, and not the ones anyone expected. Watcher has been honest about it. In those painful opening rounds, the car was simply missing aerodynamic load compared to its rivals. It didn't have enough downforce to lean on. But there was a second, sneakier issue on top of that. Mechanical gremlins in the car meant the driver couldn't properly feel what was happening through the steering. And that is a nightmare for someone like Verstappen, whose entire superpower is feeling the car move a fraction of a second before anyone else does. Take away that feel, and you blindfold the one man who could otherwise dance around the problem. Red Bull says they corrected that early. But it sat on top of a car that was already down on performance, and the balance issues never fully went away. So let me show you exactly what they're all feeling, because it's the key to everything. The RB22 has two faults, and they live in the same corner. The first is corner entry instability, as Verstappen turns in and hits the brakes. The rear of the car goes light, and nervous it feels like it wants to swap ends, like the back might overtake the front. So he can't fully commit, because he doesn't trust the rear to stay behind him. But then the corner does something cruel. It punishes him a second time. Because once he's actually in the corner, the problem flips to the exact opposite. Now the front washes out. The nose won't bite, the car refuses to turn, and it runs wide. That's the mid-corner understeer, the thing Verstappen hates most. So in a single corner, the car is loose and scary on the way in, then stubborn and pushy in the middle. Loose, then tight. And here's the killer. You cannot set the car up to cure both at once. Soften it to calm the nervous rear on entry, and you make the understeer worse. Sharpen the front to kill the understeer, and the rear gets even more nervous going in. The car is fighting itself, and the driver is stuck in the middle, refereeing a war he can't win. Now add the thing Verstappen named that it gets worse over the weekend. As track temperature climbs and the tyres go through their life, that tiny window where the car is even bearable shrinks. The balance keeps drifting under him. So he's not just fighting a difficult car, he's fighting a car that is moving underneath him, session by session, lap by lap. Every lap worse than the last. And this is why predictable matters more than fast. Give Verstappen a car that's 0.2 slow but does the same thing every single lap, and he will find those 0.2 himself, he'll lean on it, trust it, drag it somewhere it has no right to be. That's his whole career. But a car that changes its character underneath him takes away the one weapon that makes him the best in the world, his confidence to commit before anyone else dares. You can't be brave in a car you can't predict. So when he asks for consistency instead of speed, he isn't lowering his ambition. He's asking for the exact thing that would let his talent go back to work. If this breakdown is helping the whole season finally make sense, take 1 second to subscribe. This is exactly the kind of story we go deep on here every week. So the obvious answer is, fix the chassis, build more downforce, calm the car down, give him something predictable. And this is where that rule I promised you walks in and slams the door. Here is the trap. The 2026 regulations include a catch-up mechanism for engines. It's called ADUO. The idea is fair if a manufacturer's engine falls below a certain performance benchmark. The FIA lets them spend extra development to close the gap, so nobody gets left stranded on power for the whole season. It's a lifeline. And Red Bull can't touch it. Why? Because their engine is too good. This is the part that is almost hard to believe. Everyone spent the winter worried that Red Bull's brand new in-house power unit would be the weak link. Instead, it turned out so strong that the FIA named it the benchmark, the standard everyone else is measured against. Which sounds like a triumph, and in one sense it is. But it means the one team desperate to develop its way out of trouble is locked out of the engine catch-up, because the thing they'd love help with is the chassis, and there is no ADUO for a chassis. None. That lifeline simply doesn't exist for the part of the car that's actually broken. And Verstappen knows it. He said it out loud, dry as ever, "I would love to have some ADUO as well." That one line is him pointing straight at the trap. His team did the hardest job in Formula One, built a winning engine from scratch, and their reward is a rulebook that gives their rivals a helping hand they're barred from, on a car whose real problem no rule will help them fix. So think about the situation Red Bull is genuinely in. The engine is brilliant and gets no help because it needs none. The chassis is broken and gets no lifeline because none exists. And the budget cap means they can't simply throw unlimited money and parts at the problem mid-season. The one thing they got spectacularly right has quietly become the cage around everything they got wrong. And this is why this year is so much more dangerous for them than last year, even though last year they were fighting too. Last season, Red Bull's problems were the kind you could outdrive. This year, they're the kind you have to out-engineer. And the rules have tied one hand behind the team's back to do it. Before 2026, everyone assumed the new in-house engine would be the gamble that could sink them. It wasn't. It became their crown jewel. But the whole season has flipped the script. The part they feared saved them, and the part they trusted, the chassis, is the part quietly dragging a four-time champion down to sixth. When your worst nightmare turns out fine and your safe bet turns out broken, it means your own instincts about your car were wrong. And that is a very hard thing for a team to admit in the middle of a season. And that leads to the most sobering moment of Verstappen's entire summer. Because last year, this exact stretch of the calendar was his stage. In 2025, Verstappen launched a comeback from Zandvoort onward and finished on the podium in every single remaining race of the season. The second half was where he turned it on, so the natural assumption is that he'll do it again. And this year, he has quietly told everyone, don't expect that. Let that sink in. This is not a driver talking himself up before a comeback. This is the most relentless competitor of his generation gently lowering his own flag, telling us the problems are deeper this time and that a repeat of last year is not coming. When Max Verstappen stops promising a fight back, you should listen. Because he doesn't do modesty, he does math. So what is the second half of 2026 actually about if it isn't a title charge? It's about a much quieter question: can Red Bull make this car predictable, not fast predictable? Can they take a car that lies to its driver, that's brilliant one session and gone the next, and turn it into something he can simply rely on? Because if they can't do that with the best engine in the sport bolted into the back, then this stops being a bad year and starts being a warning about the years to come. And there's a clock on it. Verstappen's contract has an exit clause that is now live, which means every one of these frustrating weekends is quietly also an audition for whether he stays at all. The first test comes immediately at Zandvoort, his spiritual home race on a tight, twisting track that punishes exactly the entry instability the whole team just admitted to. If the car is going to embarrass them anywhere, it's here, in front of a wall of orange. Then, Monza, a week and a bit later, where the engine they nailed can finally stretch its legs down the longest straights on the calendar. 2 circuits, back to back, pulling the car in opposite directions, one exposing its worst weakness, the other showcasing its one true strength. In the space of 2 weeks, we're going to see both halves of this split personality laid bare. And find out which one is the real Red Bull. So here's a question worth sitting with, and I want your answer in the comments. Is Red Bull's biggest problem the car or the rules that won't let them fix it? Because when you strip all of it back, Verstappen's warning was never really go faster. It was, let me trust the car again. A champion asking at the peak of his powers, not to win, but simply to know what his car is going to do when he turns into the next corner. And the quiet tragedy underneath it is this: the one part of this machine Red Bull perfected is the very reason the rest of it is so hard to save. They built the best engine in Formula One. And it might just be the thing that traps them. So tell me what you think. Does Red Bull get on top of this car in the second half, or has this season already slipped away from the greatest driver on the grid? Drop it in the comments. I read every one. And if you want to follow this fight all the way through the run-in, race by race, subscribe and stick with us, because the next few weekends are going to tell us everything.